So over the last year, I've been able to visit Kenya, Egypt, Portugal, the USA, and Italy, all while working full-time as a doctor in the UK's National Health Service. So if you're interested in traveling while working full-time as a doctor, then this is the video that I really wish I had to get the most out of my annual leave and my self-development time in order to travel the world whilst also maintaining a focus on my career as a doctor. What is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to the channel. Hopefully it's not the first time you're watching one of my videos, but just in case it is, I'm a doctor working in London. And as I said, in this video, I'll be giving you guys all of the tips that I really wish I had in order to go on as many holidays as you possibly can in your training as a doctor. Because the thing is, guys, when you're in medical school, no one actually tells you about how this whole annual leave stuff works. No one actually sits down and teaches you how to actually make the most of your time as a doctor, your time outside of work. So this is the video that I really wish I had at the beginning of my time working as a doctor, so I can make the most out of my time off and really find a good balance between medicine and what I enjoy, which is traveling. Starting off with, how does annual leave actually work as a doctor? So if you're a doctor, or particularly a junior doctor in the NHS, you officially get 27 days of annual leave per year, which works out to be about 9 days per clinical rotation. Because when you're in your foundation training in the UK, every single year you have 3 clinical rotations. So that's 9 days per clinical rotation, or a total of 27 days across the entire year. This does go up as you become more experienced within the NHS. So I think once you work for a full total of 5 years in the NHS, I think you get another couple of days off as well per year. However, during your foundation training at least, or also probably in your early training as a specialist, what you currently get is 27 days in the entire year. And there are really annoying things about annual leave and how it works in the NHS, and I'll be touching on that topic a bit later on. But essentially, if you want to get annual leave, you have to request this with a minimum of 6 weeks advance notice. And the way you do this, firstly, is by filling out this form. Then it has to be signed by your clinical supervisor, who's normally the consultant who works on your ward. Once you have that form signed, you then have to send it off to the medical staffing, and then they have to approve it based on your rota. And then finally, you can take your time off as annual leave. And that sounds quite simple, but I promise you it's much harder in practice, because hunting down your clinical supervisor on your next rotation you don't even know can be quite difficult. And again, waiting to hear back from medical staffing whilst you're also trying to book a holiday or attend a wedding can be much more difficult. But let me pause there. I won't get into the caveats yet, but you have to give a minimum of 6 weeks notice in order to have a higher chance of getting that annual leave accepted. And as I said, I wish this is where it ended. All you have to do is get a form signed. But like I said, there are caveats which I'll go on to talk about in the rest of the video. So the first caveat, you can't actually carry on your days to the next clinical rotation. So as I said, you get 9 days off per rotation. And if you're lucky, you might be able to, but at least in my experience, you can't actually take off the entire 27 days per year altogether. You have to have 9 days separated. So 9 days in your first rotation, 9 days in your second, and then 9 days in your third, which makes it really annoying, because if you have a big holiday planned, so maybe if your family lives on the other side of the world, you can't actually take 27 days off like you would in another job. You have to take them separately as 9 days per rotation, which is super annoying. The next caveat to that is you need to give a minimum of 6 weeks notice in order to have your leave guaranteed, or at least a higher chance of it actually being guaranteed. If not, it will be rejected. So for example, if you're 5 weeks out from moving houses, or actually you have a hospital appointment that pops up, you can't actually take that leave. If you do not give a minimum of 6 weeks notice, the chance of it being accepted are quite low in my experience, which is super annoying again, because sometimes you have a hospital appointment you have to attend, or a friend's wedding who they forgot to invite you to, 8 weeks in advance. It's really annoying, but a minimum of 6 weeks notice is what you have to give. And the next thing is that even if you give a minimum of 6 weeks notice, it can still be rejected in my experience, which again, I think is immoral and it's just really annoying to have to deal with. For example, I needed to take 1 day off to attend a really important event for me. I emailed the rota coordinator 8 weeks in advance, and I told my clinical supervisor, my consultant on the ward, this is a really important day for me, and it was rejected, which was so ridiculous. I had to get into this whole battle between the rota managers, the supervisors. I had to speak to the BMA. It became this whole issue just to take 1 day off from the ward. And the reason being is because they said there were not enough staff in the ward in order to give me my annual leave, which makes no sense at all. If you're working a job and you give them 8 weeks notice for 1 day off, you should be granted that notice. So in some cases, your leave can still be rejected, but I'll talk about how to work this out later on in the rest of the video. The next caveat and a really annoying thing about this is that it's really difficult to get annual leave off ahead of time, especially if you want it off a few months ahead of time. To give you you a real life scenario. I was actually in pediatrics and I knew that in 2 months time, I needed to take some time off in my next rotation. Now, because pediatrics is sort of separate to the normal medical rota, because pediatrics is its own kind of thing in my hospital, the rota managers were different. I didn't know how, it all worked. I didn't know who my next clinical supervisor would be in the next rotation. So again, trying to find them and get them to sign my document to allow me to go on annual leave was really difficult. So getting annual leave off when you want it months in advance can again be very difficult, and it's counterintuitive, right? Surely the more notice you give someone, the easier it is to get annual leave accepted. That isn't the case. If you're requesting annual leave months in advance, it is very difficult to actually get done, because again, also in some cases, the rota coordinator may not even have made the actual rota for you to actually start in the next rotation because it's too far ahead in the future. You get what I'm saying here, but that is again something else difficult to deal with on a medical rota. And the last really annoying caveat that comes to my mind is you cannot take annual leave if you're on call, only if you're working a normal 9 to 5 schedule. So if you want to take a holiday in 7 weeks time and you want to take the full 9 days off, it's really hard to find a week where you just have 9 to 5 shifts where you can actually take time off. As a doctor, that is very, very rare. And this presents a challenge because if you're not able to take off time because you're on call, you actually have to arrange a swap with people who can take your shift during that week so you can take the full 9 days off on annual leave. So you end up having to be in this weird scenario where you're messaging different doctors saying, hey, I really want to go on holiday during this week. Are you able to cover for me? And then I'll cover for you in return. And then you have to work out your schedules and basically do the job of a rota manager by swapping different shifts and then having to email the rota manager, making sure this is also fine with your clinical supervisors. It becomes this whole difficult topic. So taking time off is not as easy as you think. You can only take it when you're not on an on-call shift during that time that you want to take off. So how do you actually manage to get the most from the annual leave that you do have? And also, how was I actually able to travel the whole entire world whilst I was a foundation doctor in one entire year? Now, the first tip I have for you guys is to apply for annual leave as early as you possibly can. So as soon as you get the rota, and in some cases even before you get the rota, try your best to email the rota manager and get your whole entire annual leave request done as soon as you possibly can. Now, the reason for this is because there will be certain times of the year that are really sort of popular in taking times off. This can be around, Christmas holidays, bank holidays, but even in that context, even if you want to take a random day off, which is not a hot time of the year, you still want to make sure that you have the highest chance of having that annual leave accepted, because if there's not enough people who will be on the ward, then you may be pressured by the rota managers and your clinical supervisors to stay on the ward because there's not enough staff to work there, like in the example I gave you guys earlier on. In some cases, you can also apply for your annual leave even before you receive your rota for the next clinical rotation. Let's say it's 10 weeks in advance. You can try your best to actually email the rota manager and say, hey, I know this is super early. I know you probably haven't made the rota yet. I would love it if you can please not schedule me in for these particular days because I have a wedding to attend. I said that can also be a caveat, but if you're lucky and the rota manager is nice and you work well with them, they may actually be able to give you that time well ahead of schedule and grant you that annual leave because you've given them so much notice. And that's another thing to bear in mind. The next tip that I have for you guys is to use the bank holidays and national holidays to your advantage. Now, if you're not on call, then you normally have that bank holiday off. Sometimes you're lucky and you have it off, and sometimes you're not and you actually have to work, and they'll give you that day back later on in the week or some other time in the month. But as best as you can, try and book your annual leave around these bank holidays. To give you guys an example, I went to Egypt recently and we had a bank holiday on the Monday. So I had Saturday where I took my flight to Egypt, I had Sunday, I had Monday, then I took off Tuesday and a Wednesday, which gave me a 5-day holiday in Egypt, all by using that extra bank holiday weekend, which made it so much better. The next tip similarly is to use your 0 days to your advantage. Now, what is a 0 day? So let's say, for example, you've worked Monday to Friday, then you've also worked the Saturday and Sunday. Because you've worked that weekend, you'll normally get these things called 0 days, which are basically days given back to you when you shouldn't have been working. So if you work, like I said, on the weekend, you'll normally have the Friday and the Monday off, or if you work the entire work week from Monday to Friday and also work the Saturday, Sunday, you'll then be given the Monday and Tuesday off. Similarly, again, if you're working a stretch of night shifts, let's say you work 4 night shifts in a row, they'll normally give you a couple of days off after, like maybe 3 days afterwards. And as long as you don't mind being a bit tired on a flight or having the first day of the holiday recovering because of the night shifts you've had, because you've been working the weekend, that's completely fine. And you can actually use those days to your advantage. If you work the Monday to Sunday and you have the Monday, Tuesday off, try your best to get on a flight on the Monday. So you have the Monday, Tuesday, which you can then take annual leave on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then you also have the following weekend on the Saturday and Sunday. And literally by using those 0 days, you've created like a 7-day holiday through using the 0 days combined with your annual leave days. And that will work out to a huge amount of time off. The next tip that that I really want all of you guys to know is that if you give a minimum of 6 weeks notice and you're not on call, you're working a normal 9 to 5 shift, then they cannot and should not reject your annual leave. I had this whole situation where I gave 8 weeks notice to go to this really important event and they said, sorry, it's not enough doctors on the ward, and they actually rejected my annual leave. The rota manager rejected it, my clinical supervisor rejected it, and I was really pissed because I've given you 8 weeks notice. If you give a minimum of 6 weeks notice, then it is the employer's responsibility to find cover for a given shift, even if there's not enough doctors on the ward. If you're not on call, then it is not your responsibility. They must arrange cover, and you're well within your right to take that time off. Now, again, I wish I knew this before I actually started my training as a doctor, because I went into this whole issue, like I said, getting advice from the BMA and all of these things. But if you give them enough notice, then the rules are the employer cannot reject it, given that it is a significant life event to the doctor. And the most important thing to realize is that the significant life event is defined by the doctor and not by the hospital. So it doesn't really matter what it is. If you have to attend a wedding because of your mother's brother's son's daughter-in-law, it does not matter. If you consider that a significant life event to you, you're given a minimum of 6 weeks notice, then do not allow them to reject your leave. Make sure you fight it out. And then the way that I actually solved my problem is I went to the consultant who runs the actual rota, and I had to speak to them in person and work things out, and they actually managed to get someone else to cover for me so I can attend my important life event that I had. A really important tip that you guys need to know is to combine your days off for annual leave with your self-development time. Now, when you're a foundation doctor, and as well as your normal training, if you're in pediatric training or whatever, specialty training, then you also get an additional 2 hours per week to work on your extracurricular stuff like your portfolio. Now, you can either take this off as 2 hours per week, or you can combine these hours to a full 1 day per month. So that means that if you're on a 4-month clinical rotation as a doctor, then in that whole entire 4 months, you should technically have 4 self-development days completely to yourself, and it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Now, some hospitals and some specialties will require you to be on site in the library to use that time. However, in my case, I have not had to be in the library, and I've actually used those days as extra time for annual leave to go and travel and do what I want to do. Now, again, like I said, you should use those days to your advantage. You can either combine that with your annual leave, or you can use those extra days and spread them out throughout the entire 4 months to get extra holidays in combination with your weekends, in combination with your 0 days, or like I said, in combination with your annual leave days as well. So combining the 9 days off you have with your annual leave plus 4 days of self-development time, that's a total of 13 days per 4 months, or in the whole entire year, that works out to quite a number of days to actually use to go and travel. So I'd highly recommend you guys to think about where you are in your life and think about how best you can use these days. For example, if you want to just divide these 13 days into small trips here and there, you can have pretty much 6 holidays throughout the 4 months just by splitting up those 13 days you have into 2 extra days spread out throughout the entire year. Because if you take 13, divide that by 2, let's say that's about 6 occasions where you can have 2 days off. You can combine those 2 days off with the weekend to create a 4-day holiday, which you can easily spend somewhere in Europe. However, if you're in the life situation where you actually need to take this time off all at once, let's say for example you have family in a foreign country, or you just want to have one big holiday with your family, and that's completely fine. You can take the 13 days off, combine that with all the weekends, and that probably works out about 18 or 19 days off in one entire given holiday period. Think about where you are in life, think about how you want to use it. I've taken the approach of having one big holiday, and that was great. I also took the approach sometimes of spreading that out equally, and that was also really nice because you do have certain things to look forward to in the 4 months period. You also have these times throughout the entire 4 months to just chill and recover a little bit. Where you decide to use your day is completely up to you, but have a think about where you are in your life and how best you can use that time. And the last thing that I want to touch on in this video is sick leave. Now, how does sick leave actually work, or what we call unauthorized leave? When you're a junior doctor, you have 20 days off for unauthorized leave, and that's for any reason that is not sort of authorized. So that's not annual leave, and that's not your self-development time. This is purely days off where you have unauthorized leave. So the most common case where you can use this is when you're sick. So if you can't go to work and last minute you have to cancel a shift, that counts as your unauthorized leave. As well as that, because we had the junior doctor strikes recently and we didn't go to work, that was also classified as unauthorized leave. You have a total of 20 days. So what happens if you go over the 20 days? If you go over the 20-day mark throughout the entire year, being F1 or F2, and what happens is that it triggers a review in your ARCP. So when you finish F1 and F2, every single year, you'll have this, what we call an ARCP, where a panel of consultants will sit down, will look at your portfolio, and will look at how much time off you've had for unauthorized leave. And based on that, they will decide whether or not you can progress into the next year. So you want to make sure that you're not going over the 20 days, and you do have some buffer or some room to play with. Because if you end up being, sick quite often, and let's say, unfortunately someone passes away and you have to go attend a funeral for a week, and you do go over the 20 days, then they may decide to extend your training. And I've known people who this has happened to. And essentially what happens is it's a day for day. So let's say, for example, you go one day over your training, then you have to make up one extra day in order to meet that minimum requirement that is necessary for you to be a junior doctor. And that is pretty much how annual leave works, how sick leave works, how self-development time works. I really hope this video has helped you guys in some way or form to make the most out of your time as a junior doctor. Because guys, trust me when I say this, working as a doctor is super long, it's stressful, and you do need time to just recover and do the things you enjoy, whether that's sitting at home playing games or traveling. It's completely up to you what you want to do with your time. And if this video has helped you out in any way or form, please drop a like down below. Make sure you subscribe with notifications on. Any questions or comments you have, leave them down below and I'll get back to you. And before you leave, here are a bunch of videos on my channel that you may enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.